Hey there, friends. And yes, fans and foes of Dad Saves America. John Papola here. And I am going to take this Friday to talk about the death of Charlie Kirk. I didn't know Charlie personally. So I'm coming to this from a slightly different place than those who know him. Those who know him well. Those who've been in this arena of conservative and right of center media people who've been in the fights with him, who've had their public disagreements with him, and who know him and love him. I've been thinking about what I can contribute to this conversation and whether there's anything useful to say. Because by now, by the time you're watching this, a lot will have already been said. And I think that, as with the other recent horrible events, it's very easy to jump to, to quick conclusions, right? To let our guts drive us. But I think there are some important things that we need to confront here, and take seriously, not just the obvious horror of a young American, 31 years old, father of two, being murdered, being assassinated in front of a crowd of students on a public university campus. I mean, that in and of itself, a private citizen, an activist, someone engaged in debate and persuasion, not force, not violence, that this would happen in this way, in this place, I think means something. And this is what I want to talk about today. Because what Charlie did, what he built his identity around, his organization around, and ultimately his impact and his influence around, was debate. It was civil discourse. It was saying, I am going to bring my view to students on these college campuses who are being soaked in the other perspective, in the materialist, secular, anti-American, postmodern perspective, and say, hey, bring your best at me. And by and large, he engaged in good faith and engaged respectfully. Playfully, boisterously, but respectfully. And even if you think he's wrong on everything, he was right on that. He was right on that. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, they are the basis of freedom of thought. Because how do you know what you think unless you put your ideas out there and get them challenged? This is as American an enterprise as you could have. And, we talk about this here a bunch, but it just happened to be that this all happened while I was interviewing someone for an upcoming project called The Death of Debate. And he brought with him this book, Resolved. Debate can revolutionize education and help save our democracy. This was Charlie Kirk. This is what he was doing. He was going to these students, these young people who are, in many cases, kind of a tragedy, who are suffering from the ills of our modern society, the mental health problems of our modern society, the ideological lunacy of our modern society. But he was going to them and engaging them and challenging them. And he died for that. So what are we supposed to learn from this? Well, the easy place to go, the place I certainly went first, is this is just the radical left. This is what this is. This is just the left. In a sense, that's true. In another sense, that's not true. Because There's been politically motivated killings across the political spectrum, left, right, and just outright bizarre. And it only takes one psychopath to cause this to happen. It only takes one. So in a large country like ours, with a wide range of views, you're just one bullet away from this happening. One crazy person. Their motivations actually don't interest me all that much. This, I think, is where the news cycle throws us way off base here, trying to understand the motivations of broken, crazy people, as if they have something to teach us. They don't have anything to teach us other than they shine a mirror on our darkness, on our brokenness as a creature, how dark we can go and how dark it can get. That's the only lesson when you look at the psychopathy of people like this. But it is a dangerous, dangerous moment. It is an incredibly frightening time. And there's a couple implications of what happens now, right? Those of us who put our voices out there into the world can't help but feel a little scared about what this means. Do we all have bullseyes on our backs? That's not a great place to be. And if you give in to that, as they say, you're letting the terrorists win. You're allowing violence to lead to silence. And that, I can't do that. You shouldn't do that. Nobody should do that. That is the path to hell. That is the path to total defeat of civilization. That's what that is. If we are terrorized such that we don't defend what needs to be defended, if we stand by quietly, well, then the worst among us rise straight to the top fast. I think the only alternative is for more people to raise their voices. And I saw a tweet, and I'm not going to share any clips or videos in this video because I frankly don't want to magnify some of the psychopathy I've seen online in the aftermath of this thing, this nightmare. But one tweet I saw I thought was pretty on the mark, and that is, if you didn't like Charlie Kirk, you're really not going to like what comes next. This was a good one, and that is true. This was somebody who dealt with people with a level of respect and dignity that I think should be celebrated, considering he had the guts to put himself in these positions, in these circumstances, to subject himself to what obviously ended up being a fatal arena. Very often, the kind of personality that's willing to do that is a little more broken and a little scarier. And the history of this race of ours, the human race, is filled with people like that. Monsters, psychopathic narcissists, dark triads. But I think the part that I can't get past is the symbolism of the venue. It isn't merely a space. He was on a college campus. He was on a public university. That is a taxpayer-funded university. Something that all of us are forced to subsidize. And what he was doing, and he had been at it a long time, through thick and thin, through the peaks of cancel culture and all the rest, he trailblazed this, was getting in the face of what I believe is a monstrous fifth column in our society, the modern university. These things have got to go. I can't escape that is the lesson of Charlie Kirk's demise. He actually persevered to try to bring peaceful, voluntary, civil discourse to what has become almost like a separate nation within our borders. A nation funded by all of us, but ruled by people who fundamentally don't agree with what we are as a country. Not every single one of them, but most of them. Most of them. most of the university system is consumed by an ideology that is antithetical to the West. It's antithetical to civilization itself. And that posture, that worldview, the thing that is responsible for the death of Charlie Kirk is a simple phrase that stands on the shoulders of a mountain of monstrous philosophy. Speech is violence. That's it. That's what did it. If there's an idea that killed Charlie Kirk, it's that. Speech is violence. Speech is not violence. This is a lie. This is a scam. This is a tool of power games by radicals who despise the very core of this country. Because, of course, our First Amendment is our First Amendment. Freedom of speech and expression was properly understood to be the cornerstone of a civil society. This goes right back to the Greeks, to Socrates, to the understanding of how the polis, the political body, works, that we engage in discourse, that we work out our ideas in a competition of ideas. That premise of the West, that there is such a thing as civil discourse, has become enemy number one in academia. And the only reason why that has remained to be true, that something so diabolically treasonous to the American project, the only reason I believe that that worldview could sustain itself is the great asymmetry of our political time. If you are on the side that wants to see government grow, you are happy to take taxpayer dollars from the government in a fundamentally corrupt relationship to enrich yourself until you rule all. That is the problem. It is not the only problem, but it is the reason why diabolically psychopathic ideas could become essentially the common parlance of institutions that were largely founded by the Catholic Church, which is to say universities, founded by the church to explore God's creation under a set of assumptions about the nature of that creation that these institutions now reject. They reject it. They reject truth, beauty, and goodness. They reject these things. I talked about this in the aftermath of 10/7. Whatever you think about 10/7, the reaction on college campuses to 10/7 was a sign that we have become a barbarous society, at least among a subset of our young people. Those on college campuses, those obsessed with radical luxury beliefs, those who have been told by the adults in their lives, the figures of authority, that speech is violence, that speech can hurt, that we need safe spaces. It's ironic because, of course, violence is violence, and the speech is violence crowd sure seems to be comfortable with actual violence. And that is why we are here. That is how we got here. Charlie Kirk was not a radical, hard right-winger. He was not. In an American context, Charlie Kirk was a right-of-center, well within the bounds of our politics voice. He was not a Nazi, not a fascist. He's just a Christian conservative. So if that's off limits, which in the university context, it is, in the university context, you are a Nazi if you're a Christian conservative. And there's a philosophical argument for it that goes all the way back to Herbert Marcuse and all of these other sort of academics who've never built anything in their lives, but words and constructed words as the ultimate force in the world, which is why they think words can be violence and speech is violence, but they're wrong. So what do we do about this? Because Charlie was doing the thing that you would want a civil society to do, which is to say, bring his message to the people in these places and engage them with respect. and he got shot for it. Now, what we should not do is retaliate in kind. And when I say we, I'm not even sure who I mean by we. There's a lot of easy ways of creating an us versus them frame for this. And there is a kind of us and a kind of them. There are multiple us's and thems. But us versus them is a path to hell. And so broad us versus them, I would like to reject. And I think we all should. But there is something we can do. Is if you agree that the philosophy of speech is violence has no place in an institution that claims to be educational, and certainly no place in an institution that gets one dime of money from the government whose founding creed includes the protection of speech, the US government, our state governments, then you have to admit that the university system needs to be stripped to the studs. It needs to be dismantled in its current form. If you are a governor in a red state, like Utah, or here in Texas, or in Florida, you need to take responsibility for the fact that you are allowing your citizenry to fund a fifth column that wants to destroy the society. We've been here before. This is the weather underground, folks. This is unacceptable. I think there is confusion in this world of ours, in this movement broadly of ours, when it comes to what to do about this. And I'm not confused about it. We need to shut these institutions down or strip them of their funding and let them sink or swim on the basis of fully and solely private action, private funding. You want to run a humanities department that is 50% self-avowed Marxists and critical theorists? Have at it with your own money. You don't get a nickel. You don't get a subsidized Pell Grant dollar. You don't get a government-funded nothing. No research, no nothing. That has to happen. That is the correct course. We have to separate school from state. It won't get rid of the ideology. I don't think we can ever get rid of this ideology. This ideology is a part of our fallen nature. It is evil, and we will always have evil. It is the old ways. It is an outgrowth of the old tribal might makes right worldview. That is what this is. That is what communism is. That is what intersectionality is. That is what all of these postmodern philosophies are, that all align around speech is violence. They'll always be with us, and we do have to ultimately fight them with our own words. But we also need to fight them with their dollars, and we also need to starve them of our dollars. And if we aren't going to starve them, if we aren't going to cut them off, all of them, every single one of them, then we need to fire them all. So if we're going to have a state university in the United States of America, we should fire all the teachers who think it is their job to promote the destruction of the society. That seems reasonable to me. This gets attacked by even some of my friends as being antithetical to freedom of expression or academic freedom. But no one has the freedom to have their job or push their opinions at other people's expense. That's not part of freedom. That is not valid. That has nothing to do with your First Amendment right as a private citizen to say whatever you want, so long as you don't incite violence. Pull all their funding and let them sink or swim on their own. We as parents, we as alumni, we have to bear responsibility for this too. One of the reasons these institutions survive in their current form, even with the vibe shift of the Trump administration and all the rest of it, is because the alumni broadly clutch their ring, their varsity ring, want to go to the football game, you name it, something that's about selfish comfort and not about taking seriously that support is supporting a fifth column in our society that wants to burn it to the ground. And that tried to in the past 5 years on multiple occasions, including this. You got to wake up. This better be a wake-up call. If a university is not a safe space for a inbound right of center person to engage in polite discourse, then that thing doesn't deserve to exist. And even without his tragic murder, the fact of the matter is these institutions have been opposed to Charlie and those like him, and those even more moderate than him, at every turn forever. And that has not relented with the 2024 vibe shift. It hasn't. And the efforts by the Trump administration to try to bear down on these institutions is being met with incredible resistance at every single turn. But this, to me, is where the action needs to be. The culture that is coming out of these places is toxic. And it is our best and brightest being destroyed by it, being warped. We've all seen the responses to Charlie's death. That is why I am here talking to you right now about this. It is not the motivations of the shooter or any of that. It is what came next immediately that has me, I want to say shocked and surprised, except that unfortunately I'm not. The videos of people walking again around campuses here in the state of Texas, asking young students what they thought of Charlie Kirk's brutal assassination, and meeting broadly a mix of either apathy or delight. That is a sign of terminal cancer for an institution and a culture. And I don't know how our society can survive if we fund the people that wish to destroy it consciously, and we turn the other way while they continue to do it. These people have everything to lose. They have set themselves up with permanent jobs trying to tear down the civilization that we live in at our expense. And they have everything on the line here. They will fight at every turn, use every means at their disposal to keep their tenured, cushy, faux radical position, indoctrinating our kids. We have to act on this. We have to. And here's the other thing about Charlie Kirk, and frankly, the whole movement that Charlie was a leader in, the movement that I am a part of, this right of center, proudly American, conservative, libertarian thing. Charlie had to raise all that money to do what he does. Charlie had to go to private individuals and was enormously effective at this, unbelievably effective, at actually raising private, voluntary, philanthropic dollars to fund what he did. He didn't just get some US aid handout or some university grant to fund some radical program paid for by the rest of us to the tune of billions. Charlie had to engage in actual civil society. Charlie was a builder of a civil society institution. And this is something that I admire about Charlie. This is something that is admirable, period, about Charlie. He did it honestly. He built something real and had to convince people it was worth participating in. And that makes Charlie fundamentally, structurally, at the most basic level, a more moral actor than any of these government-funded institutions who've cultivated a culture that despise him and me and everyone else that doesn't adopt the most radical view of reality possible. That is something that can never be forgotten. That they are not coming from a place of the higher ground. They are coming from a place that starts with extracting by force their means to propagandize us. And I think that that is often overlooked with the talk of money and politics and power. It is just a fundamentally different thing to engage people voluntarily, to get their buy-in, to be persuasive. And Charlie was persuasive in front of the camera with students, and he was persuasive behind the scenes with investors and philanthropists. That is another source of his success that I think is admirable and worth celebrating, because that is about as American as it gets. That is de Tocqueville's democracy in America. Private individuals coming together, trying to make the country better, pooling their resources to advocate for what they see as justice. That's what Charlie was doing. And again, you can like or not like his outcomes or his worldview, but that was the game Charlie Kirk was playing, not extracting by force to tear down the current order. So what shouldn't we do? Well, one thing we shouldn't do is retaliate in kind. We don't want to aid and abet the destruction of America. America is a beautiful country. It's a good country. It's not a perfect country. There is no perfect anything in the world of humans, but it is a good country, and we should want to keep it. We should want to restore it. We should want to enrich it. We should want to make it a place where the future Charlie Kirks of the world don't live in fear of getting a bullet on a college campus for engaging in peaceful debate, where that feels like a memory from a dark time. Not that long ago, the 60s felt like this dark period in American history with turmoil. Well, here we are again. And I think that's the other lesson. Here we are again, and we will be here again and again, because none of this is new. And we need to help our kids understand that, actually. That we live in a fundamentally fallen and messy world. And you have to make the best of what you've got while you're here. But utopia is not on the table. It's not an option. And so how do you navigate this fallen world, this messy world, this world that often makes very little sense? How do you make sense of a senseless world? Well, for Charlie and for myself, the core of that sense-making was in our faith, is for me in my faith. Freedom, liberty, the things that constitute the West, Lockean private property, the rule of law, these abstractions, they stand on top of an assertion. It is certainly a Christian assertion that we are called to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Those are the two commandments of Jesus Christ. And Charlie understood this, and Charlie preached this. He was an apologist for this. And he was a good apologist for this. And I think it motivated him in a way that is part of why he was a civil, happy warrior, because he started with a basic belief that every person has dignity. We are all children of Christ, children of God. And when things like this happen, I find myself, especially today and growing with every day, turning towards that, turning towards him with a capital H for what to do and what to say and how to act. And he calls us to love our neighbors. He calls us to love our enemies, which is really hard. But you have to admit, even if you don't think he was the Son of God, that he walked the walk. He let them crucify him. And by them, I mean the Romans and his fellow people. And then his followers, seeing his death, and then indeed, I believe, seeing his resurrection, began something that should give all of us hope, whether you are a Christian or not. They did the most impossible thing. In the world of battles for ideas and morals and the way we should live and what kind of society we should have, they did the most inspiring thing I can imagine. They set about proclaiming their good news, being tortured and martyred and mutilated for these proclamations. Peter, Paul, you name it, they got it. They got it bad. They did that and won in spite of it. Imagine for a moment, if you are a young man, you're a young conservative guy who loved Charlie, and you're just angry right now, and you feel like this is just another slap in your face, and that they need to pay. Imagine you're in the shoes of the apostles in the aftermath of the death of Christ, and then of Peter, and then of Paul. And you're being persecuted by the most powerful empire the world had ever seen, the Roman Empire. That probably felt pretty bad. That probably felt like pretty dark days, darker than right now. Now imagine that you could find out from there that 2,000 years from now, the Roman Empire would no longer exist. In its place, there would be this sort of weak, poor country called Italy that's got great food, but otherwise is kind of a basket case. And the seat of this Roman Empire would be occupied by the Catholic Church. The 2,000 years from your hopeless, dark persecution would be the greatest victory humans have ever seen, the longest standing institution we currently have. And you might hate the Catholic Church. You might think, Papola, you're going into this Catholic stuff. I don't want to hear it. Forget the metaphysics for a minute and just think about the improbability of that kind of success. That is what should give you hope. Or it is at least one source of hope. It is always a source of hope for me these days. Knowing that you can actually hold to your values in the face of death and ultimately triumph. And I think that is what Charlie understood to be his mission. And whether you agreed with all of that or not, I think that that was a great place to come from. And I'm with him on that. That is the most hopeful message I can give in dark times like this. Do not give up hope. Be not afraid. Turn to the better angel of your nature. And one other thing you can do, if you're grappling with this, if you're disturbed by it, if you're struggling with how to think about what comes next and what you can do as an individual, go outside. Look people in the eye. As I understand it, Charlie was an advocate for even Christians adopting the Jewish practice of Shabbat, which is to say when the sun goes down, today, on Friday, shut it all off and be with your family, be with your friends, be with people in person. Because one of the other forces at work here is the psychopathy of our social media age. The radicalization that's taking place whenever you open any of these feeds and screens is very real. It is very destructive. And to his credit, Charlie was out there in the real world, in person, looking people in the eye. And I think that's part of the reason why he was good at civil discourse, because he was doing something fundamentally human, engaging for real, not through this thing, not through the screen. And one of the worst tragedies that could come next is that fear of retribution, of attack, might lead us to retreat from our public spaces even more and hide behind our screens even more. I really hope that doesn't happen. I don't think that would be honoring him or helping our country. So that's all I have to say. I hope this brings you some value as you contemplate this, as you look at the dark moment we are in. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. And I am just praying for Charlie Kirk, his family, his children, his friends and loved ones, and for our country, because this isn't the way this is supposed to go. This isn't how America is supposed to work. And if we want to save it, we need to understand what it is. And I think Charlie broadly did. Have a great weekend.